Deep in the frozen wilderness, the legend of the Wendigo haunts those who dare to listen. From Algonquian folklore to real-life horror, this terrifying creature symbolizes greed, starvation, and the darkest depths of human nature. Tonight we dive into the origins of the Wendigo myth, true cases of Wendigo psychosis, and how this monstrous legend continues to terrify.
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
As winter comes and the weather turns frigid, human imagination tends to wander to dark depths, where the trees whisper secrets and the wind howls like a starving beast. That's where a legend begins to lurk. It's older than the first snowfall, older than the bones buried beneath the ice. The Algonquian tribes spoke of it in hushed tones, a cursed creature with an insatiable hunger, a monster that was once a man. They say if you hear your name carried on the wind, it's already too late. Well, that's not a good sign. After this break, we're going to dive deep into the story of what happens when greed takes hold and hunger never ends. In the vast, snow-covered wilderness of North America, a dark and haunting legend took shape among the Algonquian-speaking peoples. The Wendigo, a creature born from greed and insatiable hunger, served as both a warning and a reflection of humanity's darkest impulses. With its emaciated frame and ravenous appetite, the Wendigo was said to consume not only flesh, but the very essence of balance and harmony, leaving destruction in its wake. But the Wendigo is more than just a monstrous figure of folklore. Over time, it is transformed into a powerful metaphor, representing individuals, ideology, and forces corrupted by unrestrained greed and selfishness. Its shadow looms large in stories of colonialism, environmental degradation, and even the exploitation of communities for personal gain. From traditional indigenous tales to modern interpretations in literature, film, and gaming, the Wendigo continues to captivate and terrify. Its symbolic resonance persists, a chilling reminder of what can happen when humanity's desires grow unchecked. The Wendigo's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, asking the question, where does the line between survival and greed blur? And what happens when that line is crossed? The word Wendigo has its roots in Algonquian languages and translates to terms such as evil spirit or solely for self. This term is significant across several Native American languages, including Ojibwe, Cree, and Salto. The Wendigo is a supernatural being central to the spiritual traditions of Algonquin-speaking First Nations in North America. Described as a powerful and malevolent creature, the Wendigo is infamous for its unquenchable desire to kill and devour human beings. Legends suggest that humans can transform into Wendigos, typically due to greed, weakness, or moral corruption. This transformation underscores the cautionary aspect of the Wendigo as a symbol of what happens when individuals prioritize selfish desires over communal values. The Wendigo's existence within these stories highlights the dangers of greed and the devastating consequences it can bring to individuals and communities alike. It is a vivid metaphor for the destruction wrought by unrestrained human flaws. The Wendigo is universally regarded as a dangerous and sinister force within Algonquin cultures. Indigenous traditions describe it as not only a threat to individual lives, but also to the moral and spiritual health of entire communities. The creature is said to have a thirst for blood and an ability to corrupt those it encounters, spreading evil and destruction. Its presence serves as a potent warning about the consequences of isolation and the loss of humanity when greed and selfishness are allowed to take hold. Embedded within Wendigo legends is the theme of caution against isolation and the breakdown of community. These tales emphasize the importance of unity and collective well-being, warning against behaviors that disrupt social harmony. By embodying the extreme consequences of selfishness, the Wendigo reinforces the need for balance and mutual support. The Wendigo is a prominent figure in the belief systems of various Algonquin-speaking groups. While cultural nuances in the creature's description exist, there is a shared understanding of the Wendigo as a malevolent and cannibalistic supernatural being. This shared depiction reflects common values and moral principles across these diverse cultures, uniting them through the universal warnings embedded in the folklore. Often associated with harsh conditions, the Wendigo is closely tied to the north, winter, cold, famine, and starvation. These elements highlight the environmental challenges faced by the communities where the legend originated, adding another layer of meaning to the fable. The Wendigo becomes a symbol of desperation and survival in extreme circumstances, intertwining natural and supernatural elements to create a powerful narrative. Basil H. Johnson, an Ojibwe teacher and scholar from Ontario, Canada, vividly described the Wendigo. According to Johnson, the creature's appearance reflects its monstrous nature. It is gaunt and emaciated, with ash-gray skin stretched tightly over its bones and deeply sunken eyes. Despite its skeletal and starvation-like form, the Wendigo possesses an unrelenting appetite. Every time it consumes a victim, it grows larger in size, ensuring its hunger is never satisfied. This haunting combination of insatiable hunger and perpetual thinness illustrates the destructive nature of greed and excess. In various native accounts, Wendigos are often depicted as giants, vastly larger than human beings. These legends emphasize the creature's terrifying scale, which grows in proportion to the people it devours. This trait, unique to certain Algonquin traditions, symbolizes the endless cycle of greed. The more it consumes, the greater its need for sustenance. The Wendigo is a relentless predator, forever seeking new victims and embodying an eternal state of gluttony and starvation. The Wendigo's connection to greed extends beyond its physical form. It is a creature that communicates and, in some depictions, retains human-like cognition and speech. This ability allows it to taunt or threaten its victims, adding an eerie psychological element to its predatory nature. These stories, rooted in Algonquin oral history, predate European colonization and reveal the depth of belief in supernatural beings among indigenous cultures. The first written account of the Wendigo by a European came from Jesuit missionary Jean Lejeune in 1636, in what is now Quebec. In his report, Lejeune described tales of a Wendigo that had killed and eaten several people, and was believed to have plans to devour many more. Lejeune's account highlights the shared belief in supernatural spirits between 17th century Europeans and First Nations peoples. Interestingly, his report, written decades before the Salem witch trials, underscores how deeply embedded these beliefs were in both cultures at the time. Missionaries in Canada continued to document Wendigo legends well into the 20th century, demonstrating the enduring presence of these tales within Indigenous and colonial narratives. The Wendigo legend remained a focal point for discussions of morality, spirituality, and survival across centuries. In the 19th century, tales of the Wendigo spread to the western frontier, where Plains Indigenous peoples and Hudson's Bay Company employees encountered the legend. HBC records recount Indigenous spiritual leaders who fell into states of intense religious fervor, leading to accusations of being Wendigos. Community members often reacted with fear and, in extreme cases, took drastic measures. Suspected Wendigos were sometimes killed as a precaution, reflecting the seriousness with which these beliefs were held. One notable example involved the Cree spiritual leader Abishabis, who was killed by 3 men after he became greedy and murdered an Indigenous family. This act led his community to believe he had transformed into a Wendigo. Such stories highlight the intersection of spiritual beliefs and real-life consequences, demonstrating the profound influence of the Wendigo legend in shaping cultural practices and community dynamics. One of the most haunting tales of the Wendigo, documented by Lottie Chicagua Marsden, an ethnographer of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, tells of a young boy abducted by this fearsome creature. The Wendigo, driven by its insatiable hunger, planned to fatten the boy up before devouring him. Using a knife, the Wendigo cruelly cut the boy's hand to test if he had gained enough fat, but constant travel kept the boy thin. When they stumbled upon a nearby village, the boy seized his chance to warn the locals about the monster lurking in the woods. The villagers, guided by the boy's courage, confronted the Wendigo, cutting off its legs. However, the creature's horrifying resilience was revealed as it began consuming the marrow from its own severed limbs in order to sustain itself. The villagers returned and ultimately destroyed the Wendigo, ending its terror, but leaving behind a tale of morbid endurance and a truly unyielding hunger. Some Algonquian traditions claim that a person consumed by greed or who resorts to cannibalism transforms into a Wendigo, while others suggest that mere prolonged exposure to a Wendigo's influence can cause the same horrific fate. These stories go beyond supernatural folklore. They serve as moral lessons, emphasizing the importance of balance, community, and resisting the darker impulses of humanity, especially in times of hardship. Rituals and ceremonies played a significant role in addressing the fear of the Wendigo among certain indigenous communities. For the Assiniboine, Cree, and Ojibwe peoples, the Wendigo Kanzimhoan, a ceremonial dance performed during times of famine, was a striking display of cultural resilience. Dancers would don masks and move backward around a drum, creating an eerie yet symbolic representation of the Wendigo's taboo. These performances served as both a reminder and a communal reinforcement of survival strategies during dire circumstances. The last recorded ceremony took place at Lake Wendigo on Star Island, within Minnesota's Leech Lake Indian Reservation, representing the enduring presence of this myth in Algonquin culture. The phenomenon of Wendigo psychosis bridges the realm of folklore and historical accounts. Allegedly, during extreme starvation, individuals could succumb to a condition that drove them to crave human flesh. A famous Jesuit account from the 17th century describes individuals overtaken by this ravenous hunger, attacking and consuming others in their community. The only solution, as understood by those witnessing such events, was often execution to stop the spreading of madness. Cree traditions, however, recount efforts to treat the condition, involving rituals using fatty animal meats and a symbolic purging process where afflicted individuals would expel ice, believed to signify the Wendigo's icy grip, leaving their bodies. One of the most infamous true cases tied to Wendigo psychosis is that of Swift Runner, a Cree trapper in Alberta during the winter of 1878. As his family faced starvation, Swift Runner's eldest son died. Rather than seeking help from a food supply post just 25 miles away, he succumbed to cannibalism, killing and consuming his wife and remaining children. Authorities determined this was not mere survival cannibalism, but evidence of a man consumed by Wendigo psychosis. Swift Runner confessed to his crimes and was executed at Fort Saskatchewan. His story remains one of the most harrowing intersections of myth and documented history. The concept of Wendigo psychosis has sparked heated debates among scholars and researchers. Some view it as a product of cultural misunderstanding by early anthropologists, while others argue it reflects genuine historical events shaped by extreme conditions. Today, the International Statistical Classification of Diseases, or ICD, recognizes Wendigo as a culture-specific syndrome, describing it as a rare obsession with cannibalism marked by delusions and uncontrollable hunger. Modern studies suggest it could be linked to starvation-induced mental disorders, nutrient deficiencies, or social isolation. Ojibwe scholar Brady DeSanti suggests the Wendigo represents a person disconnected from harmony, causing harm to their environment and relationships. Louise Erdrich's novel The Roundhouse exemplifies this concept, depicting a rapist whose actions endanger his community as a Wendigo-like figure who must be stopped. This concept extends to movements as well as ideologies. Professor Chris Schiedler compares the Wendigo to colonialism, emphasizing how expansionism devastated indigenous lands and disrupted natural balance. The 1999 film Ravenous illustrates this, linking the Wendigo to Manifest Destiny, where unmitigated hunger for land and resources led to widespread destruction. In this context, the Wendigo becomes a symbol for forces that exploit and harm others under the guise of progress. The metaphor also applies universally, addressing broader patterns of greed and exploitation. Joe Lockhart, an English professor, describes the Wendigo as a manifestation of social cannibalism, where self-interest overrides communal values. Romantic scholar Emily Zarka ties the Wendigo to winter, hunger, and selfishness, themes central to survival in harsh climates. The creature embodies the consequences of succumbing to selfish instincts, reflecting the struggles of maintaining balance in adversity. In popular culture, the Wendigo has been reshaped, often losing its cultural context. Algernon Blackwood's 1910 novella, The Wendigo, introduced it to Western audiences but altered its meaning, portraying it through colonial stereotypes. Subsequent works like Stephen King's Pet Sematary and August Derleth's Ithequah further disconnected it from indigenous roots, focusing on horror over tradition. In recent years, indigenous creators have reclaimed the Wendigo's narrative, using it to address themes of colonialism, greed, and identity. Works like Linda Hogan's Solar Storms and Nathan Adler's Wrist integrate the legend into critiques of exploitation and loss. In media like Antlers and Fallout 76, the Wendigo appears as a monstrous antagonist, often divorced from its deeper meaning. Despite this evolution, the Wendigo remains a powerful symbol, reminding us of the consequences of our actions, even when we're desperate. The legend of the Wendigo leaves behind a haunting legacy of fear and introspection. While its roots lie in indigenous folklore, the Wendigo has grown to symbolize so much more. Its haunting presence has transcended its mythical origins, becoming a metaphor for all of the darkest aspects of human nature and societal exploitation. The Wendigo serves as a stark reminder of the cost of consuming more than we need and disrupting the harmony of the world around us. The enduring fascination with the Wendigo in popular culture reflects our collective struggle to understand and confront these darker impulses. But even as the creature continues to terrify and intrigue, it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens when greed consumes us? How far can we push the boundaries before the balance is broken forever? The story of the Wendigo remains a powerful warning, a symbol of the monsters that can emerge not only in the shadows of legend, but from within ourselves. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields, Mark Shields, and Bobbletopia.com. It's produced by Dan Wilder with original music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us directly for as little as $1 a month, simply go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. Your support helps us keep the podcast going and growing. And speaking of, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their name at the end of the show. And they are Jessica Fuller, Johnny Nix, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Brent McCullough, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you right here next time on Terrifying and True on Weekly Spooky.